Hello and welcome to another Denis Wick Get to Know. And it gives me great pleasure today to talk to Scott Robinson. And first of all, Scott, it would be great if you could explain where you are and why do you live in that particular area?
Well, good morning, Brett. I'm speaking to you from Teaneck, New Jersey, just across the George Washington Bridge from Manhattan. So I lived in Manhattan for some years, and I eventually escaped to New Jersey, where I can have a yard and a big giant oak tree and a rabbit tat for my bunny rabbit to run around in. So it's not heaven out here, but it's a little closer than East Harlem was.
Great. So what sort of inspired you to become a musician and a career as a multi-instrumentalist?
Well, I didn't set out to be a multi-instrumentalist. What happened was when I was a child, the teacher read a book to the class. And in this book, there was a kid that had a lot of problems. He was getting into fights, getting beat up and stuff, and the girls didn't like him and all this kind of, I kind of related to this kid. And in the book, the kid played the saxophone, and he would get out his saxophone, he'd come home, he'd get out the saxophone, he would play, and all these troubles would melt away, and he just would enter this world of magical sound and beauty, and everything else just vanished. I came home, I said, Dad, I want to take up the saxophone, because in 5th grade we could start taking, music lessons and stuff. And so he said, okay, are you sure that's what you want to play? Because, the saxophone does this and that. It's not really in symphony orchestras. And, he was trying to be practical about this. Have you thought this through? And I said, Dad, I'm absolutely sure. I've thought through every aspect of it. I need to play the saxophone. And the truth is, I was a big fat liar, because I had no idea even what it was. All I knew was the name, and that this kid played it in the story, and it made the world this beautiful place. And that's all I knew, and that's all I wanted to know. So I had to confess right here before you and before the world that I lied to my father. He said, okay, your grandfather used to play saxophone, and I think it's still up in the attic. And we went up to New Hampshire, and one day I was out on the porch, and I suddenly heard this sound, this amazing sound. And I came running in and through the house and out to the front door, and there was my grandfather standing there playing the alto saxophone. And I'm staring up at him like this. Wow. It was just this. I'm sure it sounded horrible. He just pulled it out of the attic, and he hadn't played it since he was 17 or something. But to me, it was the voice of angels descended upon the earth. And I just stood there like this, and he looked down at me, he said, you like that? And I said, yeah. And he handed it to me. He said, it's yours.
That's an amazing story.
So that's how it all started out with the alto. And then from there, it just grew to, I picked up baritone sax in 6th grade, and then tenor and bass saxophone I started playing in 9th grade. And so then by that time, I have that range of alto to bass sax, So things were expanding very quickly for me. And so then I started playing flute and clarinet. When I got into college, I found an old trumpet hanging on a nail in an antique shop for $3, and started playing that, and it just kind of got even stupider from there. Now I've got hundreds and hundreds of instruments around here, and it's out of control. But, for me, it's not about the instruments, it's about music. The instruments are the tools, they're the colors. Like if you're a painter and you have these colors on your palette, that's what they're for.
Do you have a favorite instrument, or do you sort of treat them all equally?
I see it a little bit like a solar system. And at the center of it is the tenor saxophone. That's the center of my musical world. and all the other instruments kind of revolve around it at varying distances. So there are some that are pretty near to hand, like trumpet and cornet, bass clarinet, and then there are some that are much farther away that are only come into the picture in more specific circumstances. And then there are things that are more like comets that go out far from view and don't return for years and years and years, and then finally come in and make one brief appearance before heading out into the void again. So that's kind of the way it is. Some of these instruments are used daily, and some are used in kind of in phases from time to time, and others are very rarely pulled out.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the projects you've got in the pipeline?
So this tour coming up tomorrow is with Maria Schneider Orchestra. She's a wonderful, wonderful composer, amazing multi-Grammy winning artist, and also a wonderful person and a very dear friend. It's been my honor to be in her orchestra. So I'm on all of her records that she's done. Oh, there's so many other things. I'm playing with this group, East Axis, that just had a new album come out. I play tenor, taragato, which is a special Hungarian instrument.
Yeah, I've not heard of one of those. Can you sort of describe that to me?
Yeah, it's a little bit like a cross between a soprano sax and a Albert system clarinet. It's wooden, and the key system is kind of primitive. It has a beautiful sound, and I really love that instrument, and I have a whole family of them now. I helped to design a couple of the big sizes. I have all the way down to contrabass. So I played that with the East Axis. I played slide cornet and some trumpet. So it's kind of an unusual sort.
Yes, that's right.
And I'm composing and recording a large-scale symphony called Reach for Tomorrow, but I'm not composing anything in advance. So there's no written music, and I don't work anything out at the piano. I just do everything by ear. So the whole thing is actually improvised, but in a very slow, deliberate, careful way. One little sound at a time, one phrase at a time, a symbol, whatever I hear, I add very carefully and put it in position. I've been working on it for almost 4 years now. And I figure I have at least another 12 years to go, because I'm about 9 minutes and 20 seconds in. And it's up to an orchestra of about 130 instruments now.
Wow.
It's the kind of orchestra that you could never would actually be able to hear on planet Earth, because of all these, some of these instruments I have are one of a kind, and I can overdub 5 of them if I want. So I can get sounds, that combinations and orchestrations that you could never hear any other way. If I was Mahler writing for Vienna or opera or something, I couldn't necessarily justify finding somebody with a sub-contrabass low B flat sarrusophone and bringing them in to sit there and in rehearsals and everything, and just come in at one moment and go, bah. But I have the luxury of that. I can use an instrument for one sound, one moment, and never again if I want. Or I can stack them up and have 12 of them come in. So this has been a dream of mine for a long time, and I keep chipping away at it. So wish me luck, because I think I have at least another 12 years to go to finish this 4 movement.
If you've got 130 instruments, the multi-tracking and getting all those things to line up the way you want it to line up must be a real challenge.
Well, it certainly is. Trying to get them in tune with each other. Yeah. That's the really tough part. I'm not using a tuning machine or anything. I'm just doing everything by ear out there. I have these certain rules about it. And all these antique, crazy instruments and weird, rotary valve piccolos and all this stuff. It's really, that's proved to be maybe the toughest thing of all.
Is there an instrument that you think is the hardest one that you've had to become proficient on?
Well, becoming proficient is, I don't know how to even define that. I know my limitations. I'm not going to grab something like a slide trumpet and try to play giant steps at some blistering tempo. I'm just not going to do that. Even I have more sense than that. But any of the slide instruments, I picked those up very sparingly. Double reeds are challenging. I don't really play oboe and bassoon. I play sarrusophones, which are even less practical. I think the most difficult instrument I ever tried to play probably is the Highland bagpipes. That's tough. That's really challenging. I have a set of pipes, and they don't come out too often. I respect pipers, good pipers who can read and play, the pibroch and all this stuff. Man, that's a whole world.
Do you have a take on, for instance, if we're talking about Denis Wick products and how a mouthpiece fits with a certain instrument? Is there a combination that you found works really well? So if you pick up a trumpet, you think, well, this mouthpiece works really well with this particular trumpet, and this mute works really well.
I'm always fiddling and trying to find what works. Many of these instruments, they're asking for an unusual shank. It can be hard sometimes to find something that physically fits the instrument and then fits sonically and musically. So, the tenor horn mouthpieces are really nice. At least the one I have, I think it's a 4. We call those alto horns here in the States.
Yeah.
And they're not really used a whole lot or paid much attention to. But one of the things I like about what you guys do is you're all coming out of this whole English brass band tradition and the cornet bands and all of that. So you guys take those instruments really seriously. And here in America, it's more like, cornet is like this little trumpet, but for you guys, it's really a different thing. It's a different characteristic of the mouthpiece and stuff like that. Because the tenor, I think it's the number 4 tenor horn mouthpiece, is a beautiful match for the alto cornet. And then the wooden mutes is the other one. I don't know if you've seen my video where I composed a little brass septet featuring those wooden mutes.
So is there an event, Scott, that took place that made you think, do you know what, I'm going to take this up as a career?
Not really. For me, choosing music was more reaching the point of having to accept the reality. It's like, you know what, you either stay on this path or you jump off. But it would have required an act of jumping off the path rather than some event that thrust me upon the path. You know what I mean? So once I got with music and she kind of took me in her arms, it just, you would have to tear yourself away. And I never tore myself away. I asked, okay, I have this saxophone now. My grandfather gave it to me. So what is this thing supposed to sound like? Who should I listen to? People said Boots Randolph, who was a kind of country Western Nashville player who was very popular at the time. So I said, okay. So I got a hold of all these Boots Randolph records, and I was listening, and I started kind of transcribing, playing along and stuff like this. I just was doing this on my own. And then one day, my brother and I went to the basement of some old woman's house that was selling off a whole basement full of records. My brother was already a jazz fan, but I didn't know anything about it. But I just said, well, I got to come away with something. And I picked up a 78 that was a saxophone player named Lester Young. And I thought, that's a cool sounding name. So I bought this 78. And once I heard that, that was it. That was it. I forgot about Boots Randolph. And I entered that whole world of Lester Young and Ben Webster and Albert Ayler and John Coltrane and Sonny Rollins and Charlie Parker and Eddie Lockjaw Davis and on and on and on and on. I got really drawn in. So years and years later, I found myself on the bandstand next to people I listened to over and over when I was a child, Chet Baker, Jerry Mulligan, Frank West. That's a really, really special thing. So that's my answer to your question is, it starts with the recordings. You got to listen and study the recordings because there's the whole history of the music. But then when those recordings come to life and they're standing right next to you on the bandstand, that is breathtaking. It's astonishing.
Is there some other things on your bucket list, so to speak, where you think, I really want to do this one thing?
I have the motivation. I have the ideas. I have the schemes and the dreams. I want to do a hot air balloon orchestra. I've been talking about that for years. So we'll see. I don't know how much time I have. We'll see what I can get done out here.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you and finding out about some of these projects, and that they are fascinating. So good luck with these ventures, and I'm sure we'll talk again very soon.
I hope so. Thanks a lot for spending this time with me.
It's an absolute pleasure.